to the show. Coming up, great guests, Janet Albrighton, Rowan Dean, Bruce Hawker, and this question about Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull's amazing spray of Bill Shorten. Does abuse in politics really work?
This man is a parasite. He has no respect for the taxpayer. He was such a sycophant, a social climbing sycophant, if ever there was one.
But first, Australia has got to wake up. We have got to get over our crazy, dangerous obsession with wind farms. Yesterday, South Australia had blackouts yet again. Last year, the whole state went black, and this time, another 90,000 homes lost power just when the temperature hit over 40 degrees. Workers got home, turned on their air conditioners. Once again, wind power was to blame. You see, South Australia has extreme renewable energy policies to cut the emissions that allegedly cause global warming. Those policies have driven the state's last two coal-fired generators out of business. One was even blown up. The state now relies on wind power for about 40% of its electricity. But the problem with wind farms, when the wind doesn't blow, there's no power. And that's exactly what happened yesterday, no wind. South Australia's wind farms yesterday produced not 40% of the state's electricity, but just 2.5%. Now, yes, there's a kind of giant extension cord that goes from Victoria's coal-fired power stations to help bail out South Australia at times like this, but that was already running flat out. So, blackouts. Now, South Australia's Labor Premier, Jay Weatherill, is trying again to pretend this disaster has nothing to do with Labor's renewable energy policies. He's blaming regulators instead for not forcing a private gas-fired plant at Pelican Point to help him out. And he seemed to threaten a state takeover of all power generators around the country.
The South Australian government has been planning to intervene dramatically in the South Australian electricity market. The events of last night only confirm in our minds the need to take this dramatic step.
And of course they want to blame it on everybody else. Well, I suppose they could blame it on the wind because it wasn't blowing yesterday.
Now, a warning. This problem is going to get a whole lot worse, and not just for South Australia. All of us will get more expensive electricity, and electricity we can't even trust to stay on if we don't wake up to this green madness. Most other states, particularly Labor states, have renewable energy policies about as bad as South Australia's. Victoria, for instance, says it wants 40% of renewable energy, that's wind and solar, and last year tripled the tax on coal. Result? That helped to force the announced closure of Victoria's giant Hazelwood coal-fired station, which supplies up to 20% of Victoria's electricity and helps to back up South Australia in a crisis. And it gets even worse still. Now, federal Labor, Bill Shorten, is promising to turn all of Australia into a South Australia. Even today, after these latest blackouts, Labor was still sticking by its plan to force us all to use 50% of renewable energy within just 13 years. That's 3 times more wind and solar and hydro than we use today. It's more even than South Australia.
We have a position that at least 50% of Australia's electricity by 2030, so in about a decade and a half, should be delivered from renewable resources.
It's unbelievable. Labor has a policy that will give us electricity that's far more expensive, electricity that's more likely to fail in a heat wave, electricity so expensive and unreliable that some factories will close. I can't believe that Labor can and will stick with a green policy that destructive. In fact, West Australia's Labor Party today panicked and dropped its own 50% target. It'll say what the target is after the election, it says, after the state election. Now, Even the Prime Minister, he's a true global warming believer. Even he thinks this is all green madness.
Labor is drunk on left ideology on energy, and they are putting Australians' livelihoods, their businesses and their households at risk.
But even Malcolm Turnbull wants us to use more wind power. He wants to increase the green power we use today by 50% in just 3 years. And even that is crazy, even if it's not as crazy as Labor's policy, obviously. Let me explain. The reason we are doing all this, why we're building these wind farms, why we're building these solar farms, why we've got these renewable energy targets, is supposedly to stop the world from getting warmer, okay? But even if you're not a skeptic like me, even if you do believe the world is warming fast, even if you do believe that any warming is dangerous, the fact remains that whatever we do here in Australia is so insignificant, so tiny, that it will have essentially no effect at all on the temperature. It really is all pain, no gain. If you don't believe me, ask your politician. Whether it's Green or Labor or Liberal, ask them. How much will your policies, our sacrifices, how much will they cut the temperature? And I guarantee, because I've asked this question of them all for years, I guarantee they will not tell you. They don't want you to know the truth. Your electricity bills going through the roof, your power going off in a heat wave, it really is all for nothing. And that is insane.